I think I'll just indicate that because we do not have the president or the vice president of the board in attendance tonight, the board will need to elect a president pro tem in order to facilitate the meeting. And I believe there is information provided to you about a process to do that, to select that president pro tem for this evening.
Fellow board members, I would recommend that we elect Harlan Parker in the absence of our current vice president and president to run our board meeting this evening.
And I would second that.
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Mrs. Wilhelm?
Yes.
Mr. Churchman?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes. Mr. Poland just asked me if I had a long acceptance speech. It was yes. Dr. All, you want to, let's see, I need to call to order and roll call, Mrs. Carpenter.
Miss Ashley? Mr. Churchman?
Here.
Dr. Daniels?
Here.
Mr. Gilmore? Mr. Parker?
Here.
Mr. Poland?
Here.
Mrs. Wilhelm?
Thank you, Dr. All. Then we would get ready for our meeting by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yes. Would our two students, Molly and Arian, please come forward? I'll tell you a little bit more about them after they've led us in our pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You want to come on over here? And I'll start with Molly. I think this is Molly right here. And Molly is a 9th grade student at Oregon Trail Junior High. She's the daughter of Kim Davis, a math teacher at Oregon Trail, and Jerry Davis. She is a cheerleader, pep club member, we can see better, student council representative. She's part of Oregon Trail Harmony and Honor Choir. She's been selected as one of the superintendent student advisory group. That's a group that I meet with and staff meet with 4 times a year to get feedback from students. And then Molly has maintained a 3.9 GPA while at Oregon Trail and received numerous academic awards. So this is Molly. Molly, would you like to point out your mother? Who I think also taught Molly math in 7th grade, so that's probably why she's doing so well. Okay. And Arian Logan is a 9th grade student at Oregon Trail as well, and she's the daughter of Jeff and Jackie Logan. She's involved in student council as a representative, Oregon Trail Harmony, and Oregon Trail's Pep Club. Ariane is also involved with a dance team as well as other school activities. She has maintained a 3.9 GPA while at Oregon Trail, and she's also received many other academic awards. So we appreciate both of you being here tonight.
Molly and Aaron, on behalf of the board, thank you for coming this evening to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Dr. All, then the next thing on our agenda would be an overview of our meeting this evening.
Yes, we're going to begin the meeting with staff presentations to the board. We'll start with the beginning of the year 2007-2008 report. We're very happy to report we had a successful opening of school. There will also be an update from the Service Center on all of the summer work that was completed in preparation for our students and staff returning. There will be a report on the Communities That Care student survey results that was a part of a board decision back in January to administer. And then a presentation on strategic planning for continuous improvement with a focus on student learning tonight, with an opportunity for the board members to ask additional questions as a result of that presentation and give input. At or about 6:30 to 6:45, there will be a comfort break, and then following that, there will be recognitions and awards, both for business partners and for staff and students that will be identified at that time. At or about 7 p.m., the board will entertain any public comments. Following public comments, the board has action items, and it will begin with the consent agenda. Those items represent matters that the board may approve without detailed discussion, as they have had information prior to this time, although any board member or the superintendent may remove an item for separate action upon request. Following the consent agenda items, there are 4 items on action, bids, contracts, and agreements. Following those, there are other action items, including the potential sale of property, supplemental textbooks for computer information technology, University of Missouri Kansas City School of Dentistry agreement, water line easements, action to set a special meeting in September for a board workshop, and then finally a special request for soccer field usage. After action items, the board has a list of future action items that the board pro tem will indicate tonight, and those action items are information that are provided to the board so that they are aware ahead of time of decisions that they may have to make at a later date. And then there are several written reports. After our written reports, the board will adjourn to executive session to discuss personnel matters of non-elected personnel to protect the privacy interests, for attorney-client relationship, and also for acquisition of real property. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. All. We have a full agenda this evening, fellow board members. I have a lot of work to do, so we'll roll up our sleeves and get started here with the first report this evening, beginning of the 2008 school year. Dr. Banikowski.
Thank you, Mr. Parker and members of the board. It's a privilege to have the opportunity to share with you on behalf of my fellow colleagues who provided input into this presentation, but decided that we better just have one person speaking through the PowerPoint. We have, as Dr. All said, we have launched a new school year, and we want to share with you some of what has happened during this beginning of the school year. The first one we might talk about is our district theme, which you of course know, Invest in Excellence, that Dr. All has brought forth to us, and it is a very exciting theme, if you will, very futuristic, investing, very action-oriented. And the first opportunity that we have to invest in excellence is to start the new school year off in a very smooth manner for our students and our families and our staff. And this is our first opportunity to have these students become, again, a part of the school district if they have not been part of the school district, and to welcome them to a new school year, the 2007-2008 school year. And I love this picture because it kind of describes our student population in the district, which is ever growing. Mr. Gollop has provided information for us, a preliminary information, projected information on the new students that we have in our district. You can see an 840 student increase. And Mr. Gollop has indicated that if this comes to fruition, it would be the 4th biggest increase in district history. So we certainly have a lot of new students to welcome into our district and new families. Mr. Gollop will be providing a more thorough report to you after we have the official September 20th report. As we take a look at our enrollments at our various schools, at our various levels, we can see our elementary enrollments here. You can see that where we have added students, our 5 largest elementary schools are listed there. You can also see our largest Title I elementary schools are listed there as well. And you can see that our largest increase has come at Cedar Creek Elementary and Meadow Lane Elementary. So that just gives you a little bit of a glimpse so far in this school year of our elementary population. You can see here we have our junior high enrollment and junior high population, and of course it has also grown. You can see our 3 largest junior high schools, and our 2 largest increases have been at Prairie Trail and Chisholm Trail. We'll also take a little bit of a look at our senior high enrollment. You can see our 2 largest high schools are Olathe East and Olathe North, and you can, however, also see that our largest increase have come at Olathe South and Olathe Northwest. So that gives you a little bit of information that Mr. Gollop would provide on where we are at with student enrollments. Certainly we know facilities and having facilities ready for our students is very important. Not only our new facilities, but also those wonderful capital outlay projects that our service center does to help all of our buildings to be excellent quality for our students. And you can see that nearly 144 capital outlay projects touch nearly every building in this district. And Mr. Houghton will be providing a pictorial information a little bit later this evening. We also know we have to get our students to school. And, you know, busing can be smooth or it cannot be smooth, and we certainly had a smooth start to our transportation with over 6,500 students actually being transported on buses daily. And you can see that we also have 2,300 of those are pay riders with that new payment option of online credit cards. We can also see that we need to have a quality staff in order for us to have a quality educational experience for our students. And our HR department, our Human Resources Department, has been very busy along with our building administrators, filling 224 certified positions. Some of those are new positions, new to the district. 27 of those were because we opened a new elementary school. But the vast majority of course, are replacements, about 167 of those positions. 5 of them are filled temporarily with long-term substitutes. But I think that's a great record to say that we have that few that are filled by long-term substitutes. Certainly not true across the nation. So our HR department needs a lot of kudos for that. We also have our classified staff that are very important to our inner working here in the district, and Dr. Letcher provided some information on the number of new classified staff members who have been hired. We have some vacancies remaining, as we do this time of the year, but we have so fewer vacancies than we ever had in the past. And Dr. Letcher and his department is doing a wonderful job, and you can see 97% of the total positions have been filled, with 77 of the vacancies that we started with have been filled. And that keeps changing. Dr. Letcher keeps coming up every day and changing those figures as we get more individuals hired. We also know that our students like to eat and need to be fed, and you can see the number of students that are involved in either breakfasts or lunches on a daily basis, and that information was provided by our food service from Mr. Kingery. You can also see that we've had a lot of technology changes for our students and our staff members over the summer, with replacements of laptops and desktops, retrofitting of digital classrooms, which are so important to our teaching process. You can see we've installed 10 elementary international language rooms, and those are so important to our new pilot project that we're working on there. So again, that just shows you the many things that, and there were many more, that our technology department, technology division has been working on this summer to prepare our schools for the opening. We also know that we have to prepare our teachers to get ready to teach those students. Many summer projects that have been going on. As you know, because you have been approving them, we had 43 new curriculums that were approved for implementation this year. It takes a lot of summer projects to help us get a jump start on that for the school year. We also know there's been a lot of staff learning opportunities, with nearly 1,000 of our staff members participated, for example, in the summer Olathe conference. And that is kudos to our staff that had put that together under the leadership of Dr. Heinen, so that we would have an opportunity for our staff to get new skills and refresh their skills. And we also know that at the beginning of the school year, we have to induct our new educators, those 224 individuals that were hired by HR, and then have to come into the teaching and learning aspects of that and to understand what their responsibilities and expectations are. And then all of our educators participate district-wide in opportunities to refresh their skills, learn about new curriculums, new materials, and new teaching strategies. In addition, preparing our teachers to teach means that we have to make sure they have the necessary resources of our board-adopted textbooks and instructional materials. We had 30 new adoptions that are being implemented this year. That's a lot of textbooks to order, to get in, to barcode, to make sure they get off the shelf and into the classroom from our central depository. So that's been a very busy summer, in addition to the additions we need for new students. And you can also see that we've been spending time making sure that our new learning initiatives, of which I just put a couple examples there, are ready to go for students. Making sure as we expand our elementary international language program that we have the ILAs, the International Language Assistance, in place. Making sure our teachers are ready to expand our math pilot for 6, 7, and 8, and all those programs that you see listed there as a sampling. So that's another thing that had to be done in order for us to have a smooth opening of the school year. Well, go forward here. Well, don't you love it? We seem to be going backwards instead of forwards, and we don't know why. We've had a successful opening, and it doesn't happen by chance, though sometimes I think we take it a little bit for granted when we welcome those 26,000 students into our district. It takes a lot of strategic planning, a lot of proactive approach, certainly focusing on our customers, making sure everyone's doing their personal best, and it takes a highly functioning team for a district our size to have a smooth opening. But we certainly know that we're not going to push that button again. Sorry. Certainly we know the most important thing is keeping our eye on the reason why we need to have a smooth opening to a new school year, and that are the students that we are serving across this district. I'm pleased to announce to you, and I know that you noticed it as well, we have had a smooth, fantastic start to a new school year. That was my overview.
I wanted to applause. Any comments from board members?
Just one question, and that question would be with elementary enrollments. What do we have a point for an enrollment cap that we look at when we're looking at our elementary enrollment for providing assistance or support with interim assistant principals or that would be able to travel to get support?
Well, certainly Dr. Donovan and Mr. Martin could provide some additional information you wish, but we have proposed adding, I guess we would call them interns, not assistant principals, interns at the elementary level when we hit a certain point. That number is different for our Title I schools versus our non-Title I schools. We do have some interns in place this year in some of our sites that have reached that number, and I don't know if Dr. Donovan, you want to give the specifics on that?
For non-Title I schools, we look at schools between 650 and 700 for assistance, and then for Title I schools, 500 to 550. Correct.
In addition, we do have, we look at the number of students enrolled and provide the support services and the itinerant services based on the numbers of students. So if vocal music tends to be one full-time person in a building, and we need to add or increase that in order to make sure that we keep equitable instruction, Dr. Donovan takes care of that as well.
One other question, and that deals with the care support and classified. Dr. Licker, I know that fluctuates. Can you explain a little bit why that fluctuates? I'm sure it has to do with student needs. Can you discuss that a little bit, please?
Mrs. Wilhelm, that parasupport would fluctuate. Parasupport would fluctuate based on student needs. That's basically the major determinant of the number of paras is based on student needs.
Example would be IEPs, as we look in through our care fee process, the needs of students, and then look at how we might serve students best through those needs.
Exactly.
Push different pieces of it.
Any other board members care to comment about opening a school? I just have to say on behalf of the board and being a board member, when you look at the enrollment increase in 26,000 students and the number 23,000 meals and the number of students we transport, and for all of that to come together, it takes a lot of hard work, a lot of teamwork. And on behalf of the community, I want to say thank you to all the staff and the teachers and the principals and all the leaders who've done such a great job on us having and this is my 9th start, so it's and every year we say that. We kind of take it for granted, I think, but obviously there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes to make it happen, so thank you. So we'll listen to our next report from our friends at the Operations Service Center Summer Update. Mr. Houghton?
We will see the slides without any talking, and so I'll deliver my 4 sentences about it. In 3 minutes and 17 seconds, it's kind of hard to show what occurred during the summer and what new construction and the service center did. The other thing is on some of the pictures that are the before pictures, they look like there was no reason to replace things, like lockers that are 30 years old. The problem is they quit making the parts, and so we get into a position of having to do some of these things.
Any comments by fellow board members?
Mr. Houghton, do you ever do any singing?
I played the music requested. That's about as far as I can go.
Great job to all the staff. A lot of work went into these schools, and they look fantastic.
I did have one question in regards to the science room additions at Olathe South and Olathe East. Are they finished? And if they're not, when is the projected completion date for those?
Of course they're finished. Mr. Thomason ran it and got it all done. They're sitting in seats and being taught in those classrooms. Is that not correct, Mr. Thomason?
Yes, there's a small punch list we're working on before and after school, but they've occupied the spaces and are using them.
Did that over the summer?
Yes, sir.
What's the response from the staff and the student body? Have we heard about that?
I wasn't going to ask until we finish the punch list.
Well, I wouldn't mind hearing back and maybe getting some pictures of that and telling us what the result and the outcome of that is, and what are our expectations for those new science rooms, and just a general progress report from the staff and from the students. And we want to see how that is going to have an impact on academic performance. No other comments on that. We'll move to the next item in the agenda for a report, which is item 2.03, Communities That Care Student Survey. And I believe Nancy Keith and Dr. Graham and Heather Schoonover bring in that report. Before we start that, maybe a little background, Dr. All, on the survey, and just some general information for the viewing audience, so they know a little bit about the Community That Cares survey, kind of an executive summary before we start the report.
This was the first year that the Olathe School District administered the Communities That Care survey as part of our Safe and Drug-Free Schools program. In previous years, in fact, going back over 20 years, we've been administering the Kaufman Teen Survey for Safe and Drug-Free Schools that was part of a metropolitan-wide effort. The state of Kansas has focused on this particular survey. It's where the primary number of school districts in Kansas give that, so we're adding to a research-based tool that's being used to help in our continuous improvement efforts in helping the community and others address some of these challenges. The staff here, I think, is going to outline this pretty clearly for us. I do want to let the board know that we do have some community representatives here tonight, because when we talk about communities that care, we're talking about the entire community, the school district, as well as other entities in the community, all of which serve our children. And we have Heather Schoonover here, who's our facilitator of Safe and Drug-Free Schools, and then Dr. Bev Graham, who has facilitated this survey, has extensive background in this area, and is our program analyst here in the district. And I might have them identify. I see the police chief here, but I want to make sure we don't miss anybody. So Heather or Bev, would you make sure you introduce right now to the board who's here representing people interested in this from the various partnerships that we have already to build on?
I would be honored to. Good evening. Again, I'm Heather Schoonover, and we do have a lot of partners, obviously, internally, Safe and Drug-Free Schools, and Dr. Graham and I work internally with all our audiences, but I would like to introduce Chief Thiessen, who's here in the audience, Captain Reynolds. We also have Debbie Dowd, who's with the United Community Services, and someone we work with a lot at the city is Victor Glover. And of course, big partners with us are all our students and parents in the room, so thank you. As you know, I want to start out the key thing. We don't have music, I don't sing, but the key thing about this PowerPoint presentation is right in front of you. Communities that care. You might hear tonight the term CTC, but truly what we're trying to share with you tonight and the people represented here is that Olathe, the community, and the school district, communities that care. With Safe and Drug-Free Schools, we've done assessments because we have Title IV funding. And so we have to report back with our assessments every year. So we've been doing this a long time. But last year, you voted that we will do the Communities That Care survey. We used to do the Kaufman Teen Survey, and with that really represented a metro-wide, and there was about 7,700 students in that survey that we could represent against. But when we went to the CTC, that started surveying in Kansas in about 1994. So when we came on board with that, now we can compare Olathe, Johnson County, and the state of Kansas. But we're looking at comparisons tonight, 71,000. Instead of the 7,700, we're looking at 71,000 that we can compare our statistics with. Just to kind of give you a background, I know you probably have seen this before, but remember that the CTC survey is provided free of charge for all the public and private schools in Kansas. And that funding is provided by the Addiction and Prevention Services. And that area is a division of the Kansas Department of Social and Rehab Services. We work with an agency called Greenbush. And they shared with us that last year, when this survey was done, 70% of the Kansas school districts were part of that survey. But before we go on, I want you to know, this survey is just one little piece of a whole entire process that we are working on with our community partners. Next slide. A lot of stuff. That is this year, Safe and Drug-Free Schools, okay? A lot of stuff that we do here in this school district. So I tried to point that down, that we have school-focused initiatives, student and parent-focused initiatives. We also really partner with our community initiatives. So just to highlight, for instance, some of our programs internally with our school focused might be Project Alert. That's our curriculum that we do. It might be, when we're talking about community, the other part of my job is Youth Friends. That's very, very important with our Safe and Drug-Free School efforts. We have before and after school program. Those are some of the student parent, and I say that because those are important. The School Plus, the extended learning, the summer school, that's all very, very important with our Safe and Drug-Free. Now, I was here in June, and we talked about a new initiative, CO3. Don't know if you remember, but that C is for cyber, O is for Olathe, and the 3 is the 3 strands we work on. That's also critical. That area has been an explosion area for my department, because when we work with the teaching and learning, whether it's library media, there's a lot of interest for Safe and Drug-Free Schools on cyberbullying.
So one question about this survey that comes up a lot is, does it have a research base? And yes, it does. In fact, in the early 90s, David Hawkins and Richard Catalano out of the University of Washington worked with 5 states, Kansas being one of them, Kansas, Maine, Oregon, South Carolina, and Washington, to standardize and develop this survey. The survey measures 3 basic things: risk and protective factors that predict alcohol and other drug use, delinquency, gang involvement, and other problems, the prevalence and frequency of drug use, and the prevalence and frequency of antisocial behavior. I think it's important, again, to remind you that this is part of a larger community planning process that will be occurring, that we'll talk about here in a little bit. This is one data source that will come from that process. I think a unique aspect of the Communities That Care model is not only will it help us decide what data to look at, what decisions to make, it also provides strategies, research-based strategies, on how to address the risk and protective factors that are important to our district. So the research indicated basically that youth exposed to a greater number of risk factors were associated with more drug use and delinquency, while those youth exposed to a higher number of protective factors were at less risk for those problem behaviors. When you're looking at the CTC model, this is basically what it looks like as far as risk factors. There are 20 risk factors that were identified that align with the 5 behaviors that go along the road on top. These risk factors are based on a review of 30 years worth of research across a variety of disciplines and were subject to the most rigorous research criteria. The risk factors had to have been shown in multiple longitudinal studies to be reliable predictors. So that's how they made it to this group, is that the research showed that they were indicative of predicting those types of behaviors. In Kansas, in 2004, there was also a study done to say, what impact do these risk factors and protective factors have on grades? And they did find a correlation, that the higher the risk factor, the lower the grades with students. On the opposite side, the higher the protective factors, the higher the grades. So not only on behavior, but also on impact for school, the research has documented both of those.
I'd like to share with you how the distribution process, and this happened. You voted in January, so right away we went to work. The survey is a 126 question survey, and it's a paper survey. It is given to the 6th graders, the 8th graders, the 10th graders, and the 12th graders. We send out a parent consent letter home to all the parents of these students. Then the teachers are the ones who administer the survey. But those teachers are given instructions. So when on the day that the student is given the survey, the teacher also instructs them that they could even opt out if they don't want to take the survey that day. So there's several different options to opt out for this survey. After the survey is taken, we then send all those to the Greenbush Southeast Kansas Education Center, and they process the results. I think it's important to share with you the participation rates. The goal in the state of Kansas is really that we would like to see 80%. In Johnson County, here's the results. 74.6 participated in the county, and in Olathe, we had 78.3% participate. Just to also, we wanted to outline, there's the participation for the 6th, 8th, 10th, and 12th. And as you can see, we did really well there. Demographics. That is not the demographics. It's pretty close, but that's not the Olathe School District demographics. That's the demographics of the students who took the survey. So as you can see, the blue is the white, the Hispanic is lined out, on, and then we have the male and female. But you might think, does this correlate with what our existing demographics are? And it does. For instance, in the survey, as you can see, 76% showed that the white participation there, and in our district, actually, it's 80.28%, so that's pretty parallel.
So the survey has 126 questions. It's broken down by grades. So how do you score this survey? What does it mean? Well, there are two ways to look at that. And the first is looking at our protective factor profile. What this shows you is the 9 protective factors at the bottom, and then shows you where we scored on the scaled score compared to the state. We are the dark color, and the gray is the state. The goal is to be higher than the state, to have higher protective factors in our community. Each of the protective factors is made up of 3 to 5 questions pulled from the survey to get that score. As you can see, we are higher on protective factors than the state averages, which is wonderful. But what about by grade? We also wanted to see, well, how do those protective factors, how do they stand up when we look at it by grade level? Now, the only way to do this, since this is a lot of data, was to put it in a balanced scorecard format. So the ones in green are the ones where we scored above the state. This survey has a margin error of plus or minus 5. So it would be when you're above 5 or below 5, that's when there's a significant area. That's a trend that's seriously to be concerned with. The yellow is that we were above the state, but not at 5 points. We were still within the range. And red would be that we were lower than the state, more than 5 points. We didn't have any red on protective factors. It also provides you, from the questions, a risk profile factor. And of course, you want to be lower than the state. The lower, the better, on the risk factor profile. So the 20 risk factors are at the bottom. Again, Olathe is in the dark bar, and the state is in the gray. So we were not above any of the risk factors on the state. We ran close on some, but we weren't totally above, more than 5 points. This takes all those risk factors. Again, this is kind of a busy slide. This is the only way to present it. Takes all the risk factors on the left-hand side. It takes all of our scores from Olathe compared to Kansas by grade. Again, the scale's the same. Those in green, we were above the scaled score on risk factor. We were below the scaled score on risk factors because we want to be lower. The yellow is we were a little bit above, but we weren't significantly above. We didn't hit that 5-point mark. And the red is that we were above 5 points on the risk factor. And you can see on that community risk factor, it's transitions and mobility. So what we wanted to do and how you use the survey is you look for those trends, and then you pull up the questions and find out, well, what was it about transition and mobility that put us above the state? Well, there are 4 questions that build that scale on transition and mobility. Have you changed homes in the past year? Actually, Kansas scored higher on that one. How many times have you changed homes since kindergarten? We scored higher on that. Now, that may be for a lot of reasons. Our students move more, or we're a growing community. So there's lots of new home developments being built, and lots of people are moving in. It would take more data to figure that out, but there's probably some trends that we can probably account for that difference. Have you changed schools, including changing from elementary to middle or middle to high school in the past year? Percent, yes. Well, because we have a 10 through 12 structure, the majority of Kansas schools are a 9 through 12 structure. Those risk areas probably showed up on the 9th graders, but are showing up on our 10th graders. So we were a little higher in that area, probably because of our structure, because our 10th graders would have switched schools because they moved on to the high school. And then how many times have you changed schools since kindergarten? Again, we are a little higher than Johnson County, much higher than the state. You've got to know that a lot of those state communities, there's not a lot of transition in those communities. There's not a new home building or people moving to that area. So those were the scores that probably bumped us up a little bit more on that one risk factor.
Okay. Before we get into these next slides, I want to share something with you. We do have Title IV funding to help us address our substance abuse issues. And like I said, we have to take these surveys to get a benchmark of where we're at, and we share that back to the state. Well, that funding that we get compared to, Mr. Parker just said, 26,000 students, that gives me $2.69 per student to address that issue. So we have to really think, how can we do the best job? That is why when we partner with the city, when we have an SRO program, when we have programs like School Plus, those are very, very, very important, because $2.69 to address these issues that I'm going to share is not a lot of money. Okay, this is lifetime use. We've broken it down. Olathe is the blue, Johnson County is the red, and the state of Kansas is the cream or white. As you can see, the top 3 issues that we see in our school district: alcohol, cigarettes, and marijuana. That is where we need to concentrate our efforts. 30-day prevalence. When we're talking about, students are saying that in the last 30 days, here's what they're saying. In Olathe, about 23% said that they had had alcohol. Now, right there, when we're talking about Olathe, that is the entire survey. It's not just 6th grade, it's the entire survey. Cigarettes, marijuana, again, the 30-day prevalence shows the same. Okay, here we've broken it down by grade. Okay, there's alcohol, cigarettes, marijuana, cocaine, inhalants, ecstasy. Okay, this chart is the one that compares where those students aren't different. And so as you can see, there's Olathe, Johnson County, and Kansas. The green shading indicates an area where we were below the state and county. Okay, so let's just take a look at alcohol, for instance. 12th graders, in the last 30 days, 46% were saying that they were drinking. Binge drinking. That's 5 drinks or more in a row during the last 2 weeks. Okay, and the reason, obviously, in the chart, you don't see the green, because last year was the first year Olathe took that. But there we've highlighted the usage of binge drinking, and we broke it also down because we thought it was significant of the 10th and 12th graders. So on binge drinking, 28.4%. Yeah, we're lower than Johnson County in the state, but honestly, if one person is drinking, that's too much. Early initiation of drug use. I pinpointed there the marijuana, cigarettes, and alcohol, top 3 things. Okay, that's not percentage, those are ages. So alcohol, they're starting to drink a little before 15 years of age. Cigarettes, 13, marijuana, around 14. Okay, the results. That was a lot of information. Some of them looked like a piano key to me. Some of it looked a lot of information. But let's really here's the results. It is very, very important that we maintain, but I want to add that we enhance our protective factors. We've invested a lot in a lot of school programming. For goodness sakes, we have a student development department. Great, great things, but let's keep going with that. It is crucial on those protective factors, like we said, communities that care. It's not just the school district, the community, our business partners, parents, they continue those protective factors for our students and our community. Okay, although we parallel with Johnson County and we are delaying our first use of alcohol and cigarettes, but let's keep getting that lower, or none at all. Alcohol, cigarettes, and marijuana, those are our three things that we're seeing. But they're also the same three things that we're seeing in Johnson County and in Kansas. Okay, our prevention efforts are very critical at junior high and high school. Those are the years, the transition years. They're starting to get what they call their wheels, starting to drive, leaving that elementary school setting, going into junior high. Communication from parents in the community and the school at those ages are critical. Okay, we got the results. Here's our plan. We have devised a school deployment strategy. We'll designate at each school a drug-free school representatives, and then we need to get this information out to them. They need to learn all this information. We want them to look at it, study it, really look at what's going on there in their school, and then develop an action plan. And then Dr. Graham and I will be working together because she's so essential on that consolidated district action plan. We want that all to align. And everyone's very busy. Let's make it as easy as possible for them. We'll do online data collection of the implementation measures. We will need to do that biannually. But it's also very, very important that we continue to work with our community partners and very, very importantly, that we work with our parents on this issue.
So that's how the plan will be handled internally. Externally, it's exciting to note that the Olathe School District and the City of Olathe and the Johnson County Regional Prevention Center have agreed to take a look at can we implement this Communities That Care system across our community. Because remember, the survey is just one part of that system. A lot of states, or a lot of counties across the state started this process back in 1996. I was fortunate enough to be involved in a community that did start this process back then. This process is research-based. We'll bring lots of community partners to the table. All in all, it ends up with a community plan, using the survey data, but also gathering archival data to find out what's really happening in our community. What resources do we have? What gaps do we have? It's a research-based model that in the end brings the communities to some decision-making on where to allocate resource and programs. I've seen it work. I've read the research all over the country. The main benefits are going through this process and coming up with a plan will improve interagency collaboration. It'll reduce duplication in services. It'll coordinate the allocation of our resources. It'll increase the leveraging of additional resources. And it will increase our use of research-based promising approaches. Because remember, we said that the CTC process doesn't leave you hanging out there to dry once you get your data. It provides lots of example programs, policies, and practices that can be implemented that will actually affect the behaviors that we're concerned with. So that's an exciting part of this, is that this will continue on. There is some movement behind the community and our partners to take this to the next step. Are there any questions?
Do you have any questions?
One, I'd like to thank you for this presentation. It's very crucial data, and I appreciate the way that you presented it. Also would like to echo the thanks to the members of the community that have come here tonight. This is not just, as we all know, a school district initiative. This is a community initiative, and it all begins at home, but we all have to band together for that. I guess the question I would ask to you and to Dr. Aul, do we plan to roll this out to the site councils, and do we plan to touch upon this at the district site council at all when we have that meeting?
I don't think that this was planned for the district site council because that may be coming up too soon in terms of some of the intermediate steps that they have. But our site councils, our building leadership teams are responsible for continuous improvement in our schools. And so those are two entities that will be working with their school principals, our leadership teams at those schools to disseminate the information to make sure that every school community has that information. And then I think if I recall from the presentation, they're identifying like a key person at each school to be sort of the safe and drug-free school representative so that they have a single source contact. You know, and we have, 43, 44 schools. Part of dissemination in and of itself is has to be systematic, and I think they have some insight about how to do that. And then we have assistance from our media and also from our community partners in the cities that are interested in this information and data, and I hope that that's another way that can be communicated out to the community at large where these issues are. I would stress, and maybe Bev or Heather can talk a little bit more about that. I'd like to talk a little bit about, we just sort of breezed by it, what are some of those key protective factors? When we talk about what keeps kids safe, what keeps them drug and alcohol free, and that's where we do exceedingly well in this community. And I think Olathe is known for taking care of its children, but that's also something that can be fragile, and if it's not properly attended to. And so I would just hope maybe you could highlight, obviously parents' engagement is one of those key protective factors, and if you want to just highlight 2 or 3 others, I think that would be helpful here to kind of frame this about why you said so strongly that we have to continue to work on that for the prevention side of this.
Sure.
And just one point before you say that, Dr. All, while the district site council might not allow us to go through this, I think it would be in our benefit to make mention to it, to everyone there, that this data is available, and just to raise the awareness that they can go out and seek that information.
That's a good suggestion.
And I will add, in addition to what Dr. All said, yes, we will have someone at each school, but I think our hope is that those schools not only have one person, but they invite a team to look at it. And I really hope a parent, a student, faculty, bus driver, everyone. We all need to really work together on this issue.
Regarding protective factors, it looks at the students' bonding and attachment in many parts of the community. Do they have places to go with their family? Does the school talk to your parents? If you do something good, will somebody know about it? Do you know people in your neighborhood do you have someone in your neighborhood that cares about you? So it looks at all across the broad spectrum of what's out there in the community and what services or activities are available for kids to take opportunities.
One of the things that is a priority in teaching and learning, and I think you're going to hear this come forward, one of the 3 strands, is enhancing our connecting relationships with students and staff, because that's a protective factor. Students who are known by their teachers and their coaches and the support staff and are and engaged in being mentored by adults and actively involved with their parents, those are key protective factors that help them grow up safe and successful.
I want to thank you not only for the PowerPoint presentation, but the actual 6 PDF files that you provided. Loads and loads and loads of information that break it down by family, by school, by problem behaviors, demographics, et cetera. I think this is excellent baseline data. I would make one comment, although I do agree that clearly we need focus at the high school for our adolescents. 12-year-olds and 10-year-olds often have older siblings, and there are 12-year-olds who are in elementary school. And so I don't think that we can lose our focus on providing those supports at the elementary level as well.
I did want to ask one question also, and that is, when we look at our unique configuration compared, and I think you mentioned that, Dr. Graham, would it be beneficial for our district to look at our 7th graders? We talk about transition and mobility. That's really the age at which we move them to a different location. They go to our junior highs. we talk about those protective factors of neighborhood, school, connections, and relationships. That's a different environment and setting for them. So I will just ask that question for consideration.
Very good point. I will kind of say something that was done. Project Alert is the curriculum. A lot of school districts don't start that till later. We have done that in 6th grade to really give that information right before that transition. But in addition to that, we also have a health curriculum in 7th grade. And that's been very important for us to get that information. But I agree, yes, good comment, and we will continue to work on those transition years.
Again, I would echo the other board members' comments about an excellent report, and it begins us taking us down the path of improvement, continuous improvement, which is one of the board's goals. Question I have is how are we working with our community partners, the police department and the other agencies that we work with? How does that all fit together? It seems like this is a massive jigsaw puzzle with a lot of pieces that have to fall into place in order for us to provide those protective factors. And that's one concern that I've had when we now are a school district of 26,000. And how do we keep that connection? How do we stay connected with those students and those families? Because we know how important that is in long-term beneficial results.
It is crucial for the community partnership. When I got in this position, I looked at, wow, a lot of kids, not much money, so you have to think out of the box. And so in doing that, I will share a couple examples with you. Daily on site, we need to keep that involvement with the police department on SROs in the building. They've really stepped up to the plate in helping us with our cyber safety initiative. Funding, this is something that we probably need to look at, funding. Do we educate some business partners in the community about this and really look at when here's a need, how can we get the problem addressed? Daily, we also, for instance, I serve on this Johnson County Stop Coalition, and we partner and we really look at these issues on a monthly basis. It's not only underage drinking, but what we can do about substance abuse. So those are key partnerships. We also partner with providers in the community. So when we have a student that has an issue, we are there, we give them the resources from the community, and we need to keep those community resources and know what's available, what beds are available, what support groups are available, what family resources are available, and it's also crucial that we do that for all populations. You know, the needs are a little different for an elementary student versus a senior in high school. So those partnerships are very, very important there. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Any other questions or comments in that regard? Thank you for that report. We're at 6:30. We'll take a comfort break until 6:45, and then we'll do our recognitions at that time. This time we'd like to begin our recognitions and awards. A part of our board agenda this evening. Before we do so, Mr. Pullen asked for 20 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. I want to take this opportunity because we have such a large group of people in attendance, especially a lot of students. As a parent, a lot of times you hear something about your kids that make you awful proud. I wanted to share something with the community and also with all the students that are here. I attended the School of Service fair at Olathe East, and as I was moving around, introducing myself to a lot of the sponsors there that attended there, one thing that stood out to me, totally unsolicited, one of the people came up to me and said, "Boy, your kids sure show a lot of respect. And I tell you what, as we talk about a city of character, we talk about a community that cares, that said a lot to me about the student body that we have here. And I just wanted to share that with the rest of the community. So thank you.
Excellent comments, Mr. Poland, and nothing like hearing it directly from members of the community who don't see our kids on a day-to-day basis. So with that, Laura Lee and Dr. All and Ms. Wilhelm and Mr. Smith will do business recognitions first, our business partners first.
Thank you. Welcome to our special guests and to their families and friends who are here tonight. And as I call your name, I'm going to ask you to come forward down the center aisle so no one trips over any equipment over here. Mr. Jim Smith, our Director of Community Development, will help with the business partner recognitions. We'll start by recognizing our Presidential Service Award winners. We're asking the representatives here from Seniors Serving School and Garrett Crum, an Olathe Northwest student, to come forward. Our Senior Serving School representatives are Diane Steele, Darlene Small, and Retta Reinhold, who are the facilitators, and Jenny Schwartzbeck, who got Senior Serving School started many years ago and is a retired facilitator. And all of the Senior Serving School representatives who are here tonight, please come forward. And then we have Earl Martin, our Director of Elementary Level Education, and Garrett Crum from Olathe Northwest. I think we have some shy seniors. And I don't know if Dr. Poss is here tonight or not, but if you're here, please come forward with Garrett. Football game. Our Senior Serving Schools volunteers have spent thousands of hours helping students since 1993. Each year, they assist teachers with tutoring, storytelling, field trips, and specialty classes, including Spanish, music, and woodworking. In 2002, President Bush challenged all Americans to help their communities through service and established the President's Volunteer Service Award Program. Tonight, it is our pleasure to recognize a number of Seniors Serving Schools volunteers who are receiving the Bronze Award for 100 to 249 hours of service. And those Bronze Award recipients are Sally Davis, Margaret Dorflinger, Dick Hitt, Linda Hockett, Shirley Hoffman, Elizabeth Jacobs, Joy Kearney, Bob Kearney, Ann Kleinfeld, Jean Ann Larimer, Linda Lester, Don Miller, Maxine Newmer, Neil Powers, Dick Schwartzbeck, Doris Springer, Susie Stutzer, and Mary Towers. And congratulations to our bronze winners. Then we have Silver Award winners for 250 to 499 hours of service, and those awards go to Ginger Armstrong, Bob Hale, Bernice Kleinfeld, Evelyn Krause, and Colleen Miller. And congratulations to our Silver Award winners. We're also recognizing Garrett Crum. And I haven't seen Garrett. Is he here? Garrett is a former Oregon Trail student and a current Olathe Northwest student. And Garrett is completing his Eagle Badge for 95 hours completed working on projects for elderly assistance, hunger and homelessness, and public safety and violence prevention. And he represents one of many students in our district, as Mr. Poland was just saying, who give their time in volunteer service. And I believe that Senior Serving School Facilitator Diane Steele has something that she wishes to share at the microphone.
Well, these represent only a few of our seniors. So on behalf of all of our senior volunteers, if we translated this into a monetary figure for the hours that they have put in, we would have a check for $77,140.70 to present.
Thank you. Thank you very much to our senior volunteers. Now we would like to recognize Barnes & Noble Booksellers of Leawood, and Jody Gidcombe is the Community Relations Manager representing them tonight. The Leawood Barnes & Noble store is celebrating its 12th year in business. Their holiday book drive has generated more than 600,000 gifts of books nationally that are given to organizations that help the needy. As a partner to the Olathe School District, Barnes & Noble has given books for English language learning students to take home and enjoy with their families. The store offers opportunities to bring visiting authors to our schools, and they offer educator and institutional discounts and special events to teachers and staff members. They also provide fundraising projects, class field trips, a summer reading program, and discounts on the classics that are required reading for students. So please help us welcome Jody and Barnes & Noble as a district partner. Now we would like to recognize People's Bank. Denise Philippi and David Brown are here representing People's Bank. David and Denise are a team for all aspects of the mortgage process at People's Bank. Both are mortgage planners with a lot of experience, and David is also a graduate of Olathe South High School. People's Bank will partner with the district to help students understand personal finance and how to retain good credit. They also employ students and partnered with the district on the new teachers' breakfast this year. Please welcome David and Denise and People's Bank as a district partner. Now we're going to have a number of people come forward to recognize Mid-America Nazarene University and the Access Program. Dr. Ed Robinson, President, Professor Neil Friesland, Professor Brad King, Jerry Renaud, Aaron Dugan, and Debbie Byrne with the Special Education Division of the district. Our district has had a strong partnership with Mid-America Nazarene University for a number of years, with many positive results for both of our students. The latest partnership development is providing great opportunities for students enrolled in the district's Access program. Access stands for Adult Career Community Education Services Support, and it provides career and educational opportunities for developmentally challenged students from 18 to 21. Beginning this year, Mid-America is providing space on their campus and employment opportunities to students participating in Access. The move to Lamphor Hall allows these students from our district to be with their age peers and experience college campus life. The 15 participants in the program work on life skills and perform part-time jobs. They receive student ID cards from the university, eat lunch on campus, and audit classes as part of the partnership. Tonight we have with us Dr. Ed Robinson, President of Mid-America, Neil Friesland, Associate Professor of Education, Brad King, Associate Professor and Acting Chair of the Education Department, Dr. Aaron Dugan, Director of Special Services, Jerry Renaud, Executive Director of Special Services, and Debbie Byrne, who provides oversight for the Access students. We would like to congratulate you and thank you for this great new opportunity for our students. If we have teachers, parents, and students here, we would like them to stand and be recognized, please. Now we would like to ask Ben Whitney, a first grade student at Countryside Elementary, and his principal, Stacy Shipley, and his teacher, Bridget Fullington, to come forward. Each year, the Kansas Authors Club holds a youth writing contest for students in 1st through 12th grade. This year, out of nearly 200 entries, Ben Whitney has been named a winner. Ben is a student who always wants to know more. He really loves learning and research. He's also a very well-rounded boy involved in scouts, piano, baseball, and soccer, and always gives his best effort, according to his principal, Stacy Shipley. His story was called The Big Day, and it's about his baseball team and a game where he struck out when he came up to bat, and he wrote a story about it. The contest results will be announced on October 5th at the annual state convention in Wichita, at which time the winners will receive medals. We would like to congratulate Ben and also to Kay Haas, language arts teacher, for encouraging students to enter. Congratulations to Ben. Now, Ben, do you have any family members here? Would you please stand? Oh, you are standing, and wave. Our next recognition goes to the people in the orange shirts. The Olathe East girls softball team with Coach Jeff Hulse, and is your principal, Dr. Tom Berry, here? Or did he have a game to go to also? Old Settlers. It's a busy night tonight. We are really excited to finally get the championship girls softball team here. As you probably know, this is the 2007 6A state softball championship team. Let's give them a big hand. In May, they won their 4th consecutive state title and the 6th in the school's history. They've been, I think, busy playing ball since then, so this was the first chance we had to get them here. East softball program is the only one in the state to ever win the state title 4 years in a row. They were 22-1 this past season and are 93-3 over the past 4 years. They had 16 shutouts out of 22 games this past season, which was a new state record. And Coach Hulse, would you like to say a few remarks?
Thank you, Laura Lee, and thank you, Dr. All, and the Board of Education for providing this opportunity this evening to recognize our girls and our state title. They're an amazing group of young ladies. To win the state championship one time is amazing, but to do it as targeted as they were, because having done it 3 times before and now their 4th time in a row, is pretty amazing. And it's an accomplishment that's never been done. I'm so proud of them in terms of who they are and how they play together as a team on the field. But I also want to point out they not only have excellence in on the field, but they also have excellence in the classroom. This group has a cumulative GPA of a 3.57, which is pretty amazing. I'm very proud of that. So they're very balanced. So they do it on the dirt and on the carpet or in the desk. And so it's a very special group of young ladies that are very driven, very goal-orientated. And it's just, what an amazing season we had. It's great to be here. I want to recognize the parents that were able to come tonight. Also, I'm not sure if Dr. Berry was able to make it this evening or not. We've got a lot of activities going, as well as at our school. But thank you, parents, for your support throughout the season. Let me introduce the girls. Unfortunately, we have some that were not able to attend. We graduated 4 seniors that are not able to be here as well. They're all at school. They're all playing on. We're very proud of that. But I will recognize the ones that are here. Jessica Brooks, if you'll step forward, 3rd baseman. Okay, Laura Vickers, our right fielder and shortstop. Michelle Ingalls an outfielder as well as infielder, utility player. She's a pinch runner. She's a little bit gimpy tonight, but it seems like every time our catcher got on base or pitcher got on base, well, she was running in form. So Michelle Ingalls. Kendall Grimm, our center fielder, an all-state selection. Kristen Rock, our catcher, also an all-state selection and all-American selection. Shelby Olson, a pitcher and outfielder. Speed demon for us as well, ran the bases in pinch running situations. Hillary Hindleiter, our catcher for us. Katie Klug, first base, designated hitter. And Jacqueline Black, our left fielder, also a catcher, recently accepted to vet school at KSU. I also left out that Kendall and Kristen, wave a hand here, have both verbaled to University of Wisconsin and are also all-state players. Emily Gersner, pitcher and shortstop, second base, as well as outfielder, very versatile. The girls, I'm very fortunate, can play a number in many positions. And then part of my coaching staff, Coach Mays was not able to be here because of a prior commitment, but we do have Coach McGee and Coach Stappingfield. And what an amazing group of young ladies. We're blessed.
We want to make Dr. All an honorary Hawk, so we got her a 4-peat shirt.
Okay, squinch. Okay, now we would like to recognize Laura Sims, Indian Creek Elementary art teacher, and her principal, Linda Voiles, if she's here, and Chris Dinnan, Santa Fe Trail Junior High School art teacher, and his principal, Carrie Lane, and Martha Gable, our district fine arts coordinator, and students. Any students from the schools who were involved in the projects or staff, please come forward. These two teachers will be leaving some big boots to fill. Laura and Chris are two of only 10 artists in the city selected for their designs to celebrate Olathe's sesquicentennial with 6-foot by 3-foot fiberglass replicas of the higher cowboy boot, part of the Welcome Home Cowboy Boots exhibit. Laura's design is called Proud Past, and Chris's is Fluttering Along the Santa Fe Trail. And both teachers included their students in the projects and even some parents. So it was a real team effort and showcases the tremendous talent that is part of our district. Congratulations and thank you for sharing your talent with all of us. And I invite everyone, if you haven't seen them yet, as you're wandering around Old Settlers, to be sure and look at those boots. Congratulations. And do we have any family members in the audience, parents, or would they please stand? Or yes, thank you. Ray. Thank you. Now we'll recognize Barbara Upton Garwin, Willetta Proctor, and Dr. Janet Simpson will come forward with them. They're representing the LEAPS internship program. We're taking the opportunity tonight to recognize a special lady who has been a great supporter of students in our district. Barbara Upton Garvin was the first person to start the LEAPS student internship program with the county, which offers meaningful work experiences to our students in a variety of areas of county government. Barbara began working for the county in 1998 as human resources consultant and later became the HR director of the Johnson County Parks and Recreation District. She co-founded the LEAPS internship program with Willetta Proctor, county employment specialist, who's also here tonight. And since the program's inception in 2002, more than 25 high school seniors have successfully graduated from the program and have contributed more than 10,000 work hours to the county, enhancing its programs, resources, and services. Barbara is leaving the county to work for the Kansas City Girls and Boys Organization, and tonight, as she receives this plaque from the county for her service to the community, we are honoring her for the legacy of student opportunities that she leaves with us. Congratulations and best wishes. And now we'll recognize Corey Norris, Aaron Dugan, Cindy Gailmore, and Lloyd Letcher for the Workforce Partnership Award. Over the summer, these individuals worked together to provide opportunities for students with special needs to gain some real-world work experience. And I've also asked Nancy Keith to come forward. With assistance from Dr. Letcher in Human Resources, Dr. Dugan in Special Education, and Cindy Gailmore, Building Administrator at North Lindenwood, Corey Norris, the Director of Student Development, was able to employ 4 students to work in the Student Development Office for a variety of jobs, including answering the phones, organizing the files, materials and supplies, typing minutes, setting up meetings, assisting students, and creating calendars and flyers. She said all 4 students had exceptional, friendly, fun, and appreciative personalities. And next summer, we're going to try and get some of them in the communications office because they sound like they were really great. This win-win partnership received the recognition of the Workforce Partnership of Johnson, Leavenworth, and Wyandotte counties, who have given the Student Development Department an award for excellence in community involvement. Congratulations.
Thank you, Dr. All, Laura Lee, and Ms. Wilhelm for helping us with our recognitions and awards this evening. We're at that point of time in our agenda where the board would take public comments. At each regular board meeting, the board reserves limited time for individuals wishing to address the board. Are there any individuals in the audience this evening that would like to address the board? Seeing none, then we will continue with our regular agenda. We'll go back to item 2.04, which is information and presentations on the strategic planning for continuous improvement and strategic directions for student learning, what we're really all about.
Thank you, Mr. Parker, members of the board. We have a wonderful opportunity to share with you this evening some of the strategic plan for student learning and to give you an overview and some specifics related to that strategic plan. This is really a follow-up conversation that Dr. Graham started last month when she gave you an overview of the entire continuous improvement strategic continuous improvement plan process. And we're going to just take that a little bit further this evening. At that time, Dr. Graham shared with you a flow chart of how we would be presenting an overview and a review process to the Board of Education, as well as we're doing throughout the district and a variety of venues. You can see that in September, of course, is your first student learning directive and initiative from the board, and that's what we're going to be visiting about this evening. Well, you know, their famous Zig Ziglar quote that talks about it's lack of direction, not lack of time, is the problem, and we all have 24 hours in a day. Now, I do quibble just a little bit. We would love to have more than 24 hours a day in teaching and learning, but we know that it is direction and planning that helps us to be strategic. We're very fortunate that we have the 5 board strategic directions that you received input on before they were developed and have received input on since then, that gives us kind of that framework from which we can follow as a school district. It is very difficult to separate these. There's a lot of overlap with all of them. When we talk about student learning, we also have to talk about involvement in climate, because involvement in climate by our stakeholders, whether they be students or parents or community, help us with student learning. We also know we couldn't do anything without quality staff, because it's quality staff that make the difference in front of children. So certainly we know that they all weave together, but because we need to write plans related to these strategic directions, we've kind of divvied them up. So you will hear some overlap periodically and opportunities that we could actually talk about other areas, but tonight we're going to solely look at the student learning area. Dr. Graham also gave us a little bit of an overview in August with this particular slide, showing us the continuous improvement process, starting from our mission statement, flowing down to the strategic directions from the Board of Education, those 5, flowing down then to goals, objectives, strategies, and then the balanced scorecard, which helps us determine how much or what type of impact we have had. In some ways, you can also talk about this as a kind of cyclic, because it also flows up. We hope that all the strategies and the objectives and goals are helping lead us to that mission statement, that vision statement, if you will, of students prepared for their future. As we think about continuous improvement plan, Dr. Graham also talked to us about 2 very important tools, process tracking tools, a continuous improvement plan worksheet, and she also talked to us a bit about the balanced scorecard. We're going to incorporate both of those tonight as we talk about the specific continuous strategic plan in the area of student learning. The first one would be in the area of looking at our continuous improvement plan worksheet. And you have been provided this information previously, and I just like to visually show you. It's a reminder that it is on legal size sheet and it's very tiny print. But involved in that particular document is indicating what student learning, some of our goal statements in there, some of our improvement objectives and our strategies and our action plans, and who is taking the lead on that action plan, and our process measures, all the way through. And you can see that very important strategic plan that we have outlined. Now, because we have over 40 plans, say that again, over 40 plans in the teaching and learning department, not counting the ones some that we have in other strategic direction areas, we have placed this on a sheet, which you also received in your board information packet. We have put that in a front back sheet because we have to communicate our strategic directions to a lot of individuals and stakeholders. Our BLT, our building leadership team members, have to understand what it is we're working on, because there isn't any one person that's going to make these student learning objectives happen. So to communicate that, we always try to make it somewhat simplistic so people can kind of take a grasp and take a hold of that. So we have that front back sheet that we have on there. In order to do that, of course, we cut out all the columns related to specific action plans and process measures. So we go back to the original document, but this is kind of our communication sheet, if you will. And we hand that out at many staff development sessions when we're talking with administrators to help keep us on the same page. As we look at how we got to where we're going in our strategic directions and our objectives and our goals, it really relates to your board-adopted decision-making process. We have to know what it is we're focusing on. We have to have decision on what our needs are. Every initiative that we have to take through that decision-making process. We have to make sure we know what it is that we're trying to focus on, who else should be involved. So that process really guides us all the way through. For example, we have to determine what our needs are. We don't just randomly select objectives to work on. We have data that tells us we need to work on that objective. For example, we shared with you last time some grade 2 reading data that 5-6 years ago wasn't very good. And that data drove us to develop an action plan and action steps and implement new procedures so that our students would be learning better to read. And so that is a piece of data that we look at. There's lots of other things, external mandates. When the State Department indicates to us that we have to add another science requirement, then we're gearing up and we're doing things differently because of that. So we are driven by those needs. Once we determine what those needs are, which change, and we get more information and we have to be agile and make changes, we then determine our goals. We then develop our action plans, and of course we monitor and adjust all the way along. So let's go back just a moment to this particular overview sheet. One of the things that our principals said to us, the administrators said to us this year, is that, you know, as clear and concise as that is compared to the long sheet and all the details, that's not really enough to help us to communicate with our teachers, to give them the big picture. Because some of these objectives relate to elementary, some only relate to high school, some only to junior high, some relate to K-12, of course. So they asked us to put together more of a visual, if you would. And this is the visual that we have been sharing. When we talk about student learning, excellence for all, the objective, that the strategic direction that we're working on, we simplistically say we're working in two areas. We're working on academics, which makes sense. We have to work on what students will know and be able to do. We're working on two major goal areas, and we could really incorporate most of our objectives into these two areas. We're increasing rigor. We're helping students to be involved in higher levels of thinking and higher levels of curriculum. And we're working on closing the achievement gap. Of course, you know, we've been recognized for narrowing the achievement gap, but we're not satisfied. We believe we need to close that gap for our Hispanic students, our African American students, our poverty students, and our females in some cases. So we simplistically put it there. Now, if we really wanted to get simple, we could say we're really working on increasing rigor, because in order to close the achievement gap, if you're a 7th grader and you're reading on the 3rd grade level, for you, that's increasing rigor to help you to read better. But we put it in both those areas to remind everyone these are two areas that we're working on and be able to articulate that. A second area is that we're working on connections and respectful relationship. You know, if there's anything that with students, parents, families, and staff members, there's one thing we know for sure, that connections and relationships helps to make achievement happen. You know, maybe it's a chicken before the egg kind of thing, and which comes first. But if we have good relations with students and parents and families, and our staff members are working well together, then we can get better academics. So we have to work on both sides of that coin, if you will. As we look at it, and you look at the more thorough strategic plan, you can find objectives and actions that are occurring relating to these particular areas. For example, you would see that we're working on increasing rigor by working on elementary high ability readers. And that's a new area that we've been working on the last couple of years, and really diligently this year. We want to communicate that we will help children who already read, maybe read above grade level, and to stretch their skills. We don't want to have roadblocks in front of students. We want to make sure that we're taking the ceiling off. So that's a focus area for us. You certainly know about our pre-algebra program, and that's a way to take the ceiling off. We're also working on AP statistics for the first time this year. We have a course in that area. So you'll see many actions, of which I just put a few examples on the slide. We also have actions related to closing the achievement gap. For example, we are working with our teachers to have skills so that they can work with English language learners that are in their classroom, because every staff member needs to have those skills. The nice part actually are those strategies are good for most learners that are challenged and struggling, so they're good strategic and research-based strategies. We have a partnership with Mid-American Nazarene University this year, and Kansas State, another partnership related to helping to train our teachers. So that's another example of an action related to closing the gap. As well as Math Intervention Strategies program that we are initiating this year for grades 5 through 8. And it will be only at a few select elementary schools, but at all 8 of our junior high schools, and you approved that. So you see many actions that help us to get to that area. Our second thing is in the area of connections. We also have actions in those areas, and I'll just highlight a few. You certainly know that one of our actions is working on actually tagging athletics and activities. I was interested in looking at some benchmark data. Very few school districts tally this data. Well, unless you have the data, how can you know if you're doing well or you're not? We're actually doing fairly well. Of course, we set our goal higher than where we're at, but we want students to be connected to school, because the research says kids who are connected to school achieve better. You also see that, for example, we're working on transition, and Mrs. Wilhelm brought that up. Out of the 6-9 design team, one of the things that we hit very heavily, and we saw in the research, was how important transitions are, whatever grade level we're talking about. In our particular case, 6th grade to 7th grade is a very important transition. And 9th grade to 10th grade is an extremely important transition. So our administrator training in August was on transitions. We've been doing a monthly conversations, and actually every other week it seems, on the area of transitions. And what can we do to create a seamless, comprehensive transition program? Does it mean we're not doing anything on transitions now? No. But it means we're not quite where we want to be in helping to make that a smooth transition so kids aren't quite as fearful of that next level, help them to not miss a beat as they go on. So that's a big focus for us. And you certainly see some of the other initiatives, a parent leadership initiative. I know that Mr. Poland and Mrs. Wilhelm know a lot about that, and we're moving that forward with training actually coming up again with that. And every middle school, junior high will have a parent group this year. We started already at California Trail, already getting some in gear at the other schools, and that will be another initiative for that connection piece. And certainly those colleagues and staff of things we've talked about there. So to give you the broad perspective, we're working on academics and connections. We're working at increasing rigor and closing the gap, as well as making connections with students, parents, families, and colleagues and staff. And that's where all our action plans fall under in a kind of a simplistic way. Every one of those action initiatives has an action plan, or has an action plan maybe even being developed. Because it's some new area that we're focusing on. So we have those action plans that we utilize. You see one there before you related to physical education and the use of technology. And Mr. Brad Bingesser is responsible for writing the plan, pulling the people together, but he's not the only one implementing that. And you have a board report asking for approval of technology, and it is part of this action plan. One of the things we know is that we have to be very data-driven. Whether we're talking about the beginning when it tells us we need to work on something, or in the middle when we see if we implement a new initiative, and in the middle are we getting some dipstick points so that we can decide if we need to go on or correct course, and at the end of initiative, oftentimes at the end of the year, data that tells us are we on the right track. So data is very important throughout that whole decision-making process. We have identified, when we talk about those particular objectives that we're working on, some expected results that we have. It is also more tailored when you come to looking at the balanced scorecard and the strategic initiative sheet. It tells you exactly what ACT score we're working toward, what our benchmark areas are. So all of that is outlined. We share this generic information with all our stakeholders and our teachers so that we're all on the same page moving toward the same expected objectives. Dr. Graham talked about not only this particular document that tells us what we're working on in our action plans, but she also talked about how important the balanced scorecard was. And as you might remember, her balanced scorecard that Dr. Graham keeps for us, we provide her data and she kind of collapses and keeps it, is again a long sheet, and there's actually several of them, this one happens to be student learning, that keeps information for us regarding our year-to-year comparison. It provides us our benchmark target, if there is one, and that type of information that helps us determine if we're making progress. Well, in our particular department, we also use this balanced scorecard. It's very important to us. We refer to it all the time. I think we carry it around a lot. And it helps us to provide that information and data to determine how we're doing. It's not everything is on the balanced scorecard. You couldn't have everything on it, but it provides us the most important kind of measurements that give us that particular information. And then the board, of course, receives the balanced scorecard. And I know Dr. Graham is working to put that on our website as well for transparency with our other stakeholders. We also have an internal balanced scorecard in the teaching and learning department because we have to look at more specific data that helps drives us to the next piece. Mary Matthews, our Director of School Improvement and Assessment, is going to share a little bit about our internal balanced scorecard and some of the pieces of data that help to drive our decision making. Mary?
Thanks. As Dr. Banikowski alluded to, our internal card that we use really provides for us just those measures at a glance. You can see we've also listed our targets, and in a minute I'll share with you some additional data. The data on our card is pretty comprehensive in terms of all of our plans. We try to take a peek at everything to help us monitor. Many of our measures are summative, or those are the annual assessments, as you also might look at it. Let's take a look, though, at some of our AYP information. We brought to you last month information related to adequate yearly progress in our schools. We know that as a district we made AYP based on the preliminary results from Kansas assessment. We also know that as a district all of our subgroups made AYP. We also know that of our elementaries, all of our elementaries made it for their all student groups. And in a minute we'll take a peek at what it looks like for our student groups as a district. We also know that all 12 of our secondary schools made it for the all student group. Because this data is still preliminary, we're still kind of working with some of those things, but what I will show you on the screen represents our district figures for our subgroups and for our all student groups. I think as we look across the board, some of the growth that we made in the area of reading for not only all students, but if you look across the board at our ELL students, you can see a significant jump in the scores from the previous year. Because the Kansas assessments have only been given for 2 years, we only have 2 years of comparative data. And I really shouldn't say they've only been given for 2 years because they've been given since the early 90s. However, we only have 2 years where it's the same assessment tool where the data is comparative. When we look at our data in mathematics, you'll see similar results of growth across the board for not only all students, but students who receive free reduced lunch, our special education student population, and our ELL students. One of the things we know is that the target this year will be raising, and so as we monitor and look at our results, that's something that we continually keep our eye on. We've also shared with you recently, I think probably you saw it, we've shared with you our ACT scores, but wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to see those and to see how that impacts what we do in teaching and learning. We know that our ACT scores are flat. When we look at them, they're good. When you see a 23.1 this year, that's a good score, but yet when we look across the board, our scores are flat. We have action plans that address those needs for our ACT, and hopefully we'll start to see those go up. You know, our target is a 24, and it's going to take a team in order to get us there, schools and TNL and parents and community. Debbie? Typically, we've averaged about 80%. However, the last 2 years, about 67%. So we have decreased the number and percentage of students taking it, and our scores have still choosing not to take it. Okay.
Mary, before we leave that, would it be possible to get some data for the board, just to go back a little bit further in time? You know, go back into the late 90s, just so we can see what those trends are.
I think I go 10 years back. I'd be happy to get
Great,
that
10
for you.
years would be great. And, you know, similarly on the SAT scores, if you have that kind of information as well.
Pardon me?
On SAT as well.
Yes, I can get that as well for you. And I do think on your balanced scorecard, we go back, how far? 7 years on the balanced scorecard, I believe. But I'll get you back as far as we can. So we've got that information. You have in front of you for ACT the scores by high school just for this most current year. We do analyze it year to year, and we have 5-year trend data on that we can provide. You can see how Olathe compares to the state and the nation. We're always above the state and the nation, but yet when we compare to our peers across our neighboring districts, our scores tend to be flat for ACT, so it is an area that we're continuing to work on. We also analyze our ACT information by our core and non-core scores. It's important as we look across the past, starting in 2003 to present, we still have gaps between those students taking a core curriculum or in terms of thinking about it as a college curriculum, a curriculum that would prepare them for college coursework, compared to those who do not. We need to do a better job of making sure we've got kids enrolled in the right courses, and that's part of our action plan and part of the things that we're working on. SAT results, what you can see there are our most current SAT results. We just received today by FedEx our school scores, so we haven't had a chance really to look at the individual school scores yet. But you can see as a district the information since 2002, and you can see the percentage of change. You'll notice last year we had decreases from the 05-06 school year, but you can see we're back up this year where we would hope to be. When we look not only at ACT, SAT, all of those pieces of data, we have data related to pre-algebra that you're going to get to hear tonight, and Luann Hermick is going to walk you through a specific plan and data that relates to that.
Mary, just one comment before you go. On the teaching and learning scorecard, the internal one, I know the number of National Merit Scholars, I was looking at some data back in 2000, 2001, where we were up in the mid-20s, I believe. If we could fill those grade boxes in with data as well, just so we could see those trends and maybe understand what was transpiring during those times?
I will do the best I can. In some cases, data in the past, if I have not been the collector of the data, we're trying to pull that together. So we'll do what we can.
Okay, thank you.
The final chunk of what we're going to be talking about tonight, as Mary mentioned, is to highlight teaching and learning action plans, the actual steps that we are taking to be very strategic in our goals for students. And we want to review one plan with you kind of from start to finish, and I chose a short one. Our district active planning template was unveiled in the fall of 2006, and as you can see on the slide there, all action plans take us from every detail to name the plan leader down to the goal outcome, delineated project activities, how the plan is monitored both with short-term process measures and long-term process measures. As Mary mentioned, the one I selected, or we selected for tonight, features our grade 6 pre-algebra initiative for our high-achieving math students. So let's look at page 1 of your plan. I want to start with the action plan leader. Listed there is Mrs. Julie Niddle, and the person listed first there is always responsible for the implementation of the plan. But I think what Julie will easily acknowledge is all the help that it takes to implement this one single plan. Joanne Hyatt, Mr. Earl Martin, the math department assistant, Secretary Susan Lowe, building principals, teachers, parents, all of these folks have a part in implementing this 2-page plan. The goal is listed there, and you can see we start with the goal and then we break it down to the objective and then the outcome. Student learning will increase. We're targeting advanced learning at all levels, including success for underrepresented students, which is very important, and I'll show you in a minute how that is monitored. The outcome there suggests that we want to increase elementary students' access to and success with. So we're really not just monitoring, do we provide a program, but we are also looking throughout all of our plans, what is our participation, what is the success rate, are our kids completing these initiatives. And then, as I mentioned, this is a 6th grade plan. The evaluation component, which is the bottom chunk there, this is the place where the developer of the plan really has to pay careful consideration to what the data is going to look like that's going to monitor the success of this plan. And you can see Mrs. Niddle has outlined quite a few details there. A through D lists everything from how many students annually qualify to even take the exam, down to how many of the students actually took the screening exam, how many qualified for the class, and D said how many actually enroll. You can see we have fresh data under 0708 in that column that highlights the recent data from A to D, showing that we have approximately 214 listed on the plan. We actually have more students because we gathered a few more students within the past several days. But every part of this particular evaluation plan is analyzed and broken down so that the data can be organized from the very beginning, which makes it, of course, more successful in monitoring when you have all of that created from the very beginning. We said in our goal that that our goal is to increase the success for our underrepresented students. Well, in order to do that, we need to really collect the information. How many of our Hispanic students are actually participating in this learning opportunity? So Mrs. Nettle has created this particular baseline information, and we will continue to monitor the success of that implementation. Page 2 actually gets to the action plans that Mrs. Niddle is responsible for implementing. And what we look at here is what are the major chunks of any given action plan that must be successfully implemented to reach the goals that we've outlined on that first page. And you can see some of the highlights there, everything from the responsibility of the test,
how the communication plan is laid out, that the test is delivered. Informational parent meetings have to be strategically planned, a whole line of communication related to that, selection of teachers, training, orientation. Once the students are selected and the teachers and parents understand the program, what are we doing to help our parents understand and our students understand the expectations? So all of these are big steps that lead to a successful implementation. Timeline and the success measures are all reported on each individual action plan. One of the things we want to talk about in just leaving the actual plan a bit is the role of communication. And what you see here is an example of an annual report that's already been updated and developed. This report goes out now to all principals. It highlights the progress of this initiative so that we can share it with other people. And then you see another example of how we are continually examining data and sharing information. This might be the sample of a slide that Miss Matthew would include as an update in a T&L meeting, showing the success that we've had over the course of the 3 years of implementation from 2005 to this current school year, growing from 6.6% to 11%. It's also very important that we are aware of the feedback our parents have for us and our students have for us. And of course, these students then have to be planned for with this initiative. So this particular plan leads to additional plans. What is the long-term success? What is the next step with what's going to happen with these students? Stepping back for just a moment, you've heard just a little bit about the pre-algebra action plan. Do you have any questions or any clarifying points related to that specific plan? I know you received that as an attachment. Okay.
I have one question. You noted that 90% of students eligible went ahead and enrolled this year. Is that correct? Did I read that?
Yes, I believe so. 90% of the students actually.
So that other 10%, is it a transportation issue?
Generally transportation.
We did have a few students that reported that they did not choose to attend because it was too early in the morning, and for that particular student, that was not a good fit for their life.
Just a few final comments about action planning and teaching and learning. All of our plans, and Dr. Banikowski's mentioned we have over 40 of them, are based on student needs. We have to be constantly aware of what the data is telling us. And then we have to be responsive and on our toes to adjust and enhance any plan based on new information, changes in trends and data, resources that may come our way. And then sometimes we are not really in control of things that may come down to us. So it's this constant evolving process. We're learning by doing, and that's the important part with the plan too. It's not that these are just written and placed in a nice notebook. The part you're hearing here is the action. What are we actually doing? And I think the quote there is sometimes the reality for us. Sometimes it's ready, fire, aim. Because we learn so much by getting out and doing and learning more about processes, and keeping on our toes, and the agility is really a key to success.
As we wind up a very comprehensive look at, here we have this entire strategic direction on student learning and all these initiatives and plans. It is quite complex. But what we want to do is certainly take an opportunity while we have many plans in gear. And some people that would look at strategic planning would say we have too many plans that we're trying to move forward at one time and too many actions. But we have to plan ahead. We have to be responsive. We have to look at pieces of information. And as a board, you provide as many guidance points on that. Whether you decide that it's appropriate for us to expand elementary international language, or if you decide we should add an AP statistics course, or you determine if parent leadership initiative is important. You provide that guidance all the way along as we go. but we also know that you would have opportunities to, as you looked at this kind of big picture, as Dr. Graham talked last month, of looking at those current plans that you looked at, and you look at in the big sheet that Bev provides to you, and the more synopsis sheet, if you will, that we provided you as well. What are the things that we should look at for either for future presentations, maybe information that you would like to have on particular action areas? What are key action objectives that you think we should be considered? You've seen some data you'd like to see us considered as actions for the future. Are there key objectives? You know, we're already starting to think ahead and plan, because we're taking, I always try to describe, we're kind of like a big cruise ship. And if we have to change course, we're changing a lot of people. It's not like we can get all the third grade teachers in one little room and, you know, in 30 minutes get them all going in a new path. It takes a lot. It takes a lot of staff training, resources, curriculum changes. So we recognize that we're already starting to lay some seeds for the following year, as well as we're operating in this year. We used to think it was a bad thing to say that we were building the plane while we were flying it. Now, I don't think we're building the plane. I do think, however, we are tinkering with the plane. We're modifying the plane while we are flying it. And it was nice to read in a recent journal that that is actually a very important strategic change process, and that it is acceptable. So we felt much better. But we would like to ask for your input, whether it be this evening or as you have time to digest, either through email to Dr. All and myself. But we would like to just take a moment, as Luann did with the pre-algebra, questions you might have or comments about things that we might do a little differently.
Dr. Banikowski, continue to compliment you and the staff on the balanced scorecard tool. Great tool, great development. Just curious, I know we had talked here last meeting or before that about having the strategic plans located on the website and even having a link to the action plan. I'm just curious as to where we might stand on that.
And I'm going to ask Dr. Graham, though she's a little under the weather, to talk a little bit about where we are on that. And I also know that Dr. Shirk is taking notes for our department of things that she might suggest to us. Dr. Graham, maybe a little update on where we're on that.
I know that those discussions are in place, and part of what we've done on the website so far is we've linked all of our schools and our district to the Kansas State Department of Education's webpage and to their scorecards on each one. But we are in the process of looking at how we get all that data on so that we can share it. We're also working on to have a briefer balanced scorecard that's on our website all the time that has certain key indicators that will be public, and I think senior leadership is deciding on what those key indicators would be. Obviously, our balanced scorecard is 20 pages long, so we want our consumers to be able to get on the webpage and see what's important right up front to them.
Great. So if you could just keep us apprised as to the timing on that. The balanced scorecard and the action plans are great resources for parents to go to, particularly if there's an area of focus or interest that they want to dive into deeper. So getting that out there for them will be a great tool as well.
Absolutely.
Any other comments? Dr. All, do you have a comment in regards to this report? I thought it was, I know it was an outstanding report, and again, once again, a lot of work.
Tie-up slides.
A lot of work, a lot of teamwork goes into the process of getting to the point we're at. I'm tired just looking at it, but I mean that in a nice kind of a way, not bored. It's just a phenomenal amount of work. I know that.
I'd just like to compliment the staff as well, but I think the point here is that there is a process. It is very strategic. It's research-based. We have excellent leadership here, not only of our teacher leaders in the classroom, but also those like Julie Nettle, who's significantly involved in improving our leadership and math coordination, Dr. Banikowski and others. And so it comes together. One of the things we're trying to do, and you know we've been working on this now for a year and a half, is to get all of our alignment documented in a sense. I think we've always known and thought that we were doing a good job, and we had pieces of our process throughout the organization, but we're trying to get this aligned so that actually can be totally transparent out there on the website. And it is a lot of work. When you look at those 41 action plans, when the teaching and learning department started really looking in detail and making sure everything is aligned, you know, you can see that It is a tremendous responsibility, and it is not something that just happens overnight. So I think my point to the board would be these projects, action plans are underway for 2007-08. If you now having this as your first round here with this new continuous improvement process, this would be the time then to really look at this after tonight over the next few weeks, and if there are areas that you might have questions or concerns about, is to make sure that we get that now so that we can work with staff or come back and discuss this further with you, because they're not slowing down. They're continuing to go. We don't have any time to waste. And so we want to have that kind of involvement. And I think Mr. Churchman's point that when we can actually, I think, show people what's behind each decision, that I think that improves confidence and the credibility of the community and our parents in what we're doing and why we're doing what we're doing. And looking at the data, and Dr. Graham's addition to our staff, she's our taskmaster leader. She's the one that's helping us align across divisions. So the next month you're going to have another section of this, and you think this tires you, then you know you're going to get more tired reading this. But I think as we go through this for the next year, we will find in 2008, 2009, we're in a much better place, and we won't be learning a new process at the same time we're doing what we're doing. We will have that process internalized in the organization, and that's what I'm very pleased with. We've come a long, long way in having one process that we're trying to communicate through and understand, and I appreciate everybody's work on it, and all of the staff, because it hasn't been easy, and we're still not done.
I might tie us up with just a few comments and a few slides. And one of the things that we certainly know from school improvement research and certainly the change process is that we cannot have random acts of improvement. And we certainly know many organizations and districts, it would be my background, districts that have the flavor of the month and everybody's kind of going in their own direction. One thing we have learned, we've been doing strategic planning and teaching and learning for 20 years. We are refining that, and we have learned a lot from the new process of helping infuse that in the entire district. But one thing we have learned definitely is we cannot be all on different pages. Now, that doesn't mean we aren't doing something a little different at certain schools based on their data and their needs, but we know that we have to have a very aligned acts if we're going to get the kind of improvement and results that we want to have as a community and as a district. So we really try to be results oriented. And I think this quote that we have here from Patricia Phipps, it really kind of focuses on that. You know, tell me what you want, show me 1 week of your life, and I will tell you if you will get it. Actions lead to results. We are focused on results. We are constantly talking about how to get to those results, as well as still being agile, as Luann said, because things change. We have to be reactive to data, and we have to be reactive to the world around us. So we are very results oriented. We try to be aligned, and we continue to look at what's most important for us, and that is the fact that we want all of our students to make sure that they are having a very successful educational opportunity. And when we think about all students, that's a big effort that we have to go. And we'll never reach there, but we're certainly going to work our hardest to make sure that we do get there. So with that, that kind of ends the strategic look at teaching, learning, your board direction number 1.
I did have a couple more questions. One deals with a CTC that will be integrated probably, we've already started the process into the strategic planning, I'm assuming, and a check off of already what we are doing, and I saw some of that in the report that was done.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, and you certainly saw also that even before CTC results were unveiled, if you will, or released, is the fact that we had already had respectful relationships and connections as an important piece of teaching and learning. And adding that piece just adds more information for us to react to and recognize it is important. Transitions are important. Mobility is important, and that we need to spend that time on there. So it's interesting how that kind of came from several directions and pieces of data to get that piece.
The second would be, I know, Mary, that these are preliminary results, but gosh, at least a start of a celebration. And when you look on page 7 and you know how many students from 3rd through 8th grade took these reading and math, and even more. And I know it says preliminary, but I hate for us to rush very quickly over this page when it truly is, knowing how difficult, and the bar goes higher for us to make AYP as a huge district. So we probably need to continue looking at and hoping. So.
And stopping to celebrate a moment. Success breeds success.
Many thanks for an excellent report. I also appreciate the documentation of accountability, because I think, as you mentioned in your presentation, it's one thing to have a plan, it's another to identify a leader for that plan and be able to hold that leader and the group that supports the leader accountable. So I commend you for doing that.
It has helped to identify a point person, not that it isn't a team around it, but at least it's that person is kind of helping us to be spurred forward on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Banikowski, Dr. Graham, and Ms. Hermick and Mary for those reports. So we'll move on in our agenda. The next item in our agenda is the consent agenda. And the following items on the consent agenda represent matters that the board may approve without detailed discussion. Any item on the consent agenda may be removed for separate discussion as an action item upon the request of the superintendent or any board member. The board has received supporting information on all the items prior to action on the consent agenda. Are there any items that a board member would like to address or remove from the consent agenda? None. I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Parker, I move that we approve all consent agenda items as listed.
Second.
It's been a motion made by Mr. Churchman and seconded by Mrs. Wilhelm. Mrs. Carpenter, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Churchman?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Mrs. Wilhelm?
Yes.
The next item on the agenda this evening is action items, bids, contracts, and agreements. Again, the board may approve bids, contracts, and agreements with one motion and without detailed discussion. Any item may be removed for separate discussion and action upon the request of the superintendent or any board member. The board has received supporting information on all the items prior to the action on bids, contracts, and agreements. And I do notice that, Dr. All, you would like to go to remove 6.04.
Yes, we'll bring that back at the regular October board meeting. We're still working on some language in that agreement, and I want to have a chance to thoroughly review that and have you take another look at it.
All right, so with that, we'll let the record show that 6.04 is being removed for action in a future meeting. Are there any other items on the bids that a board member would like to address or question? I have one. I got to find it. Just a minute. It's harder being here than not having to do this. So. No, it's in the next section. Sorry.
Mr. President, I move that we approve all bids and contracts and agreements as listed, except for item 6.04.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion by Mr. Poland and a second by Dr. Daniels to approve bids, contracts, and agreements as listed, except for item 6.04. Mrs. Carpenter?
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Mrs. Wilhelm?
Yes.
Mr. Churchman?
Yes.
Then we have other action items that are going to be taken separately by the board for consideration and vote, following by a brief presentation by staff. And the first one that we have is 7.01, sale of property at 1400 West Santa Fe. Dr. All?
Yes, if you'll remember, this is the former Prairie Learning Center facility, which we did move that program effective this August to the new facility on the Olathe Northwest campus. That older facility, which was a former church, is vacant at this particular time. You received a report last month indicating that staff are recommending that we place that property up for sale. You have information here that this would be through a sealed bid process and would also be a point that the board still retains the right to accept or reject the bids, but that we would check to see what a competitive price might be on that piece of property. There's been staff analysis on this, that this is due to limited parking, limited space there, the needs to upgrade the building, that it does not meet the needs that we might have for a variety of reasons in sort of a cost-benefit analysis. And so we think that the resources we could get out of its sale could be better used elsewhere.
Mr. Houghton, do we have a minimum bid expectation? I'm not asking you to state that, but if you could just tell me that, please.
Yes, we have some thoughts of what a minimum bid would be.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on this? I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Parker, I would move that we approve district personnel to proceed with the potential sale of the former Prairie Learning Center building located at 1400 West Santa Fe by a sealed bid process, whereas any such sale will be subject to the board's receipt, review, and approval of an acceptable bid as determined by the board.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion by Dr. Daniels and a second by Mr. Churchman for that motion. Mrs. Carpenter?
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Mrs. Wilhelm?
Yes.
Mr. Churchman?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Next action item we have is 7.02 supplemental textbooks, computer information technology.
I'll just, I'm sorry. I just wanted to mention the reason we have this listed as a separate action item is that this had some time sensitivity to it. We have an opportunity to purchase these resources, and so because it wasn't listed as a separate report a month earlier, what I'm trying to do is keep the consent agenda for those things for which you've had prior information or typically routine, and then when we have to make an explanation by this is an important action item, but then we would keep that as a separate action and not integrate that into the consent. So with that said, we've not had previous information on this, but this is the next step that happened this summer for following curriculum revision, which was approved. So if you've got questions, Dr. Shirk is here to address any of those.
Dr. Shirk, what is our total cost that we're planning to spend for these textbooks?
I don't have that in front of me at this time.
If you could just provide that to us at some point after the meeting, please.
Any concerns or any questions on behalf of the board? Then I'd entertain a motion.
Make a recommendation to approve the purchase of instruction materials for computer information technology.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion by Ms. Wilhelm and a second by Mr. Poland to approve the purchase of the instructional materials for computer information technology. Mrs. Carpenter?
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Mrs. Wilhelm?
Yes.
Mr. Churchman?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes. Next item on the agenda is item 7.03, the University of Missouri Kansas City School of Dentistry Agreement. Dr. Aul?
This also falls under a similar situation where we have an agreement with them that we want to be able to access now. And so Cindy Gilmore, our Director of Health Services, and Mr. Earl Martin are here to just give a very brief overview of this.
Good evening. This is similar to initiatives we've done in the past. The difference is this is using student dental hygienists to perform the screenings, and then if we indeed, the university receives the REACH Healthcare Foundation grant, there would be additional services provided to students. So similar that we have agreements with universities to have student teachers in our buildings, we have agreements with universities to have student nurses in our buildings. This is an agreement to allow these student dental hygienists to help perform screenings on our children and we are piloting this at 4 of our Title I elementary schools that are not participating in another dental initiative at this time.
And again, I would apologize for the lack of information prior to this, but our discussion with the UMKC in terms of presenting this to you was not timely in such a way that we could present that at an earlier board meeting. But because of the timelines, we do request approval so that we can proceed with the agreement with UMKC.
I'm assuming that as there are safeguards in place for liability for student teachers, as I know specifically for me placing speech-language pathology graduate students in your district, that there is some agreement in terms of liability and protection and a level of supervision that you all feel is appropriate for these services.
They will have an instructor with the students at all times.
Again, this is a question that I had thought of this afternoon, and I had read it over the weekend, and it has been bothering me, and I think I'll go ahead and bring it to our attention now. I noticed that this is agreement that was agreed to in Missouri, and we're in Kansas, and wondering the legal implications of that. Should it become to be an issue why it's in Missouri and not Kansas?
You want to address that?
I'm sorry, I had thought of that earlier and I didn't ask, and maybe I need an. Okay.
Yes, Mr. Parker, that question came up, and actually the draft that you will be approving has that provision taken out, and it should reflect Kansas, that it'll be governed by Kansas law.
So that's not the draft that we have. That was in the packet, so there's a different draft?
That's correct. It's been replaced.
Yeah, the provision does state Kansas law form, section 2.
It was replaced.
Yeah, there's a contractual provisions attachment that reads that to the extent permitted by Missouri state law not inconsistent with the doctrine of sovereign immunity, the agreement shall be subject to and governed by the laws of the state of Kansas. So that was kind of a compromise because they had a similar restriction to what we have in terms of agreeing to the jurisdiction of another state. So that was the compromise language that we inserted.
When would we know about the results of the application of the grant that would allow us then to have continue with dental services once the screenings were completed?
November, you should find out. One great benefit of this proposal, and I'm disappointed that Rita Ashley's not here tonight, because about a year ago she approached me and said, Cindy, we need to be applying for some of these Reach Out healthcare grants. And the priorities for that grant are access to healthcare issues, and oral health care is another priority for that grant. So we just truly feel that this grant will be approved because this addresses both of those areas. The initiatives we've done in the past, we've had one thing lacking in those, and that is that students who did not have Medicaid or Health Wave or who could not afford private pay were left out. And so that's what the beauty of this agreement and having these grant funds is that no child would be denied for inability to pay. And to give us more data for the grant and give credibility for the need for the grant, they wanted to initially conduct the screenings to show the need. We have some data from the state of Kansas on some screenings that were done in third grade settings across the state, but we'll have a little bit better data on the need by doing these initial screenings, and we think that'll increase our chances of receiving the grant funds.
Well, given that I feel very strongly that oral health, dental health is very important for our students in terms of their continued consistent attendance at school, as well as their ability to attend without being in pain while they are at school, I would make a motion that we approve this agreement with UMKC.
Second.
Thank you, and thank you for the report and the information. So I have a motion by Dr. Daniels and a second by Mr. Churchman to approve the agreement. Mrs. Carpenter?
Mrs. Wilhelm?
Yes.
Mr. Churchman?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Next, the next item for action is agenda item 7.04, water line easements, to authorize the signature of the easements with the recommendation additional language.
Greg, would you like to give some overview comments for that, please?
Well, I can. This is basically an easement on the west side of Lone Elm Road, adjacent to Prairie Trail Junior High School, for the installation of a water line. It's both the permanent easement and a temporary construction easement. In a review by myself and our consultants, the only thing we noticed missing is the fact that this does run through the dam for our detention facility that was required when Prairie Trail was built. And we're just asking that additional language be added before we sign the easements, that they will also restore the dam and the spillway for the detention basin. Other than that, it's a relatively routine easement.
Just out of curiosity, how long do we know if the reconstruction of the dam actually held? Are they liable for a certain period of time?
That I don't know. We refer to it as the dam and the spillway. It's only about 3 feet tall. It's a box culvert. I mean, that's sort of the civil engineering term for it. It's not, it's not a real dam for a real pond. It's a dry bottom detention facility, maybe 3.5 feet tall with a box culvert. So it's not that significant a dam.
Any more questions? If there are no more questions, I'd call for a motion.
Mr. President, move we authorize the signature of the easements with recommended additional language.
Second.
Thank you. Motion by Mr. Poland, second by Mr. Churchman to authorize the signature of the easements. Mrs. Carpenter?
Mr. Churchman?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Mrs. Wilhelm?
Yes.
Next action item we have is 7.05, action to set special meeting in September for a board workshop on Tuesday. The proposed date currently is Tuesday, September the 25th at 6 p.m. Dr. All?
We tried to work to accommodate, I believe, every board member's schedule. Betty worked hard on this. Our intent would be to bring in a facilitator. Once the meeting is set, then I'll make the final decisions on the facilitator. Our purpose would be to look at board processes, look at your board goals and action steps for your part of the strategic planning process as well, and other items that you might want to suggest to the board president as I work with him and the vice president to plan the meeting. A facilitator that we're looking at is someone that a couple of board members saw when we were at the National School Boards Association, and I think he has good skills here. If he is available to come in, I would use him to meet with my staff in the morning, to work in consultation with me, work with our two board officers that morning, as well as work with the board that night. So I would try to make sure that we got as much expertise from him in terms of governance, board policies, procedures, and also board action steps prior to that evening. And each of you would have an opportunity to have some input into what we're going to do.
So the proposed date is Tuesday, September the 25th at 6 p.m. Is that date and time work for, I'm assuming it for Mr. Gilmore and Ms. Ashley, it's working for them, so. Mm-hmm. And this is really about board improvement, how we work together and how we work as a team, and board governance. So it's about board improvement. We talk a lot about district improvement, so we're working on ourselves here. So practice what we preach. I'd entertain a motion then.
Mr. Parker, I move to set a special meeting for a board workshop on Tuesday, September 25th at 6 p.m.
Second.
Thank you. Motion by Mr. Churchman and a second by Dr. Daniels to set a special meeting for a board workshop on Tuesday, September 25th at 6 p.m. Mrs. Carpenter?
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Mrs. Wilhelm?
Yes.
Mr. Churchman?
Yes.
Then the next action item we have is 7.06 soccer field usage request. Dr. All?
This was a late request. It came to Mr. Ader, our district athletic and activity director, and Mr. Ader's here, so you might come forward just in case the board has questions. St. James High School is seeking a playing field to fulfill a contract that they have for a soccer match. St. James is a relatively recent Catholic high school that resides within our school district. They do not have their own facility at this time and been using Lone Elm Soccer Complex for their matches. And they are in a bind because of some previous commitments, and they cannot reschedule, and they've asked on a one-time basis only if they could use our facility, because we don't typically rent out our grass fields. We have rented baseball in the summertime, but we don't typically rent those out. I brought this to the board. Jim has been working with them, and I don't know if you want to add any additional details to what we've arranged. They would be willing to provide the costs of rental fee and perform the cleanup responsibilities. And so we're just trying to work with them as a one-time only situation, and I feel pretty comfortable this is something that we could make work this one time, but I don't want to get in a position that these fields, which we have to have ready for our players, that would be as a routine matter utilized by others than our students.
I think that really covers all. They really can't find another date to play with this other school, so it would basically mean that those schools would be short one game on their schedule, which happens sometimes, but if we can help them out, that's an opportunity we have.
I'm not familiar with St. James. Where are they located?
On 95th Street, west of K7, way out there. And
They're in our school district. They are, I think, they opened starting with freshmen first.
Freshmen only.
And now they're up maybe through juniors.
Juniors this year.
Yes, and so they're starting into, and they're playing catch up and on their athletic fields. We actually, St. Thomas Aquinas and St. James are two private Catholic high schools that both exist within our school district, and some of the people that attend those schools are our patrons, and so I think this is an opportunity for us to be helpful here.
And we also do have partnerships with both those schools. They use our pool facilities. They rent those for their swim team since they don't have those either. So, but this is a one-time, made pretty clear to them.
Mr. Parker, I move that we approve the request from St. James High School to use the soccer field at ODAC on September 18, 2007.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion by Mr. Churchman and a second by Ms. Wilhelm to approve the request from St. James High School to use the soccer field at ODAC.
Just a clarification, do we want to add the language at the end of the motion as an exception to board policy?
Mr. Churchman.
I would maybe suggest a different, maybe a variance to our practice as opposed to policy, because within the policy there is an opportunity to rent our facilities out, and we do in a variety of ways. It just hasn't been our practice to do that as far as the fields are concerned. So I think it's a good comment, but maybe use a different word than policy.
So I would amend our motion at the end to state, whereas such request is a variance from the district's practice.
Mrs. Well.
Second that.
So we have amended motion. Mrs. Carpenter, are you okay with that motion? Then you've got that?
I do.
All right, then we'll call the roll.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Mrs. Wilhelm?
Yes.
Mr. Churchman?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
The next item on the agenda, on our agenda this evening are future action items, of which there are 17. And I had some that I wanted to discuss, but I'll defer to my fellow board members for them to see if they had any questions about any of the future action items. This is a good time for us to ask staff if we have any questions concerned about any of those 17 future action items that are going to be on the agenda, I assume, in the next month or so.
Mr. Parker, I have two brief comments on 8.02 and 8.03.
Sure, Mr. Churchman.
On 8.02, I would just like to request that the board be provided with a copy of the RFP, just for information, please.
Sure. For the benefit of our viewing audience, 8.02, Mr. Churchman, you want to go ahead and reiterate what that action item is going to be?
That centers around doing an evaluation for classification and compensation study for district personnel.
We will provide you a copy of the RFP, Mr. Churchman.
Thank you. On 8.03, boundary study group work plan, just a recommendation back to staff to take under advisement that I think I'd like to see some thought given as to how we can improve the way that we bring neighborhoods in for boundary reviews, to give consideration to being able to do that where we don't bring multiple neighborhoods in together where they feel pitted against each other, but we try and find a way to go neighborhood by neighborhood. And I know that's easier said than done, particularly given the size of some boundary adjustments that we may be contemplating, but would just like to get some feedback after staff has had a chance to reflect on that.
Are there any other board members who have questions about the future action items?
I've got a couple. I'm just going to read my questions. And on 8.01, if I read this, part of the revision is if the SRS can ask our representative to leave the meeting, and it just seems to me, I'd like some explanation. Doesn't have to be given tonight, but it seems to me if they're on our campus, we ought to have a representative in attendance.
I can maybe speak to that. I know Ms. Keith and Scott Mason are also here. I think we're subject to the state law there, and in the case of SRS, as they may be investigating abuse, they tightly regulate who can be in the room because of potentially compromising or making uncomfortable the discussion. And Scott, you may want to add to that as well.
Yeah, there's a statute that just essentially says that we are to cooperate. Doesn't get into the specifics of who can be in the room, but SRS does try to maintain, I think, confidentiality in terms of their investigations. So we would still be trying to help facilitate to a certain degree that communication without, being necessarily involved directly in the interview.
Was that clear or not? Or do you need more information, Mr. Pullen?
Board policy, what is it, Section J, I guess? Board policy, Section J, something about the driver's license? Can you give me the Cliff's Note version of what that is?
Okay, it's the legislature essentially enacted a law that, and there's a little bit of conflict between the law and what the FERPA, which protects educational records. Essentially, whenever a student gets suspended or expelled, we're supposed to notify law enforcement, and then they make a report, and the student's license can be suspended for up to a year. The problem with that is FERPA doesn't necessarily have an exception that allows that kind of disclosure. So what we have, in consultation with KSB and their legal staff, have decided to do is have or ask parents to sign essentially a consent form that would allow us to share that information. And if they sign it, then we'll go ahead and forward that. And if not, our intent would just be to reflect that they refused to consent to the disclosure, and then we wouldn't forward that. And that's pretty much the advice that we've received from KSB and their legal department as well.
Scott, could you make a clarification when we talk about suspension? It would be long-term suspension or expulsions. Is that, am I correct about that?
Yes.
Not, so suspensions beyond 10 days because the principals have the authority up to 10 days suspension, but this would be when a student would have to be part of a hearing because it would be significantly impacting their education to be suspended longer than 10 days.
Have another question, Mr. Poland. Okay.
I have another question for Mr. Thomason on the 143rd Street Benefit District.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Poland. Could you hold that? I had some more questions on. I had some questions on this as well, and I thought as long as we're on it, we'll just take the. Thank you. Well, for the benefit of the viewing audience, what we're doing here is we're looking at some board policies that are going to be recommended to be changed in the future, and some of those are required changes based upon state law, and those ones we've been discussing. I also noticed on JDDC, which is the new policy on bullying, that this is a requirement of a new state law to comply with the new state law. I'd just like to know about the training programs that are readily available and what. I don't need an answer tonight, but before we approve it next month, I'd like to know what specifically are we doing in the area of bullying, and when we read all of the data in regards to violence in schools, we understand that part of that is a result of bullying, and so I understand why it's really important that we have the appropriate measures in place to prevent bullying, and I'd just like to know what are we doing.
Bullying is a very important issue to the point that in the state of Kansas there is a new state law. Dr. George, I might, if I'm not articulating the number correct, it is Senate Bill 68. Yesterday I was in Topeka on that training, and every school district in the state needs to address the issue by the end of this year in 3 ways. We need to have a policy. We need to say how we're going to implement that, and then we need to do the training. In our school district, we've had a policy, we implement it, and we also train. We could probably do some more training on that issue to a lot of different, it's not just administrators, it's not just teachers. Maybe we do some training on our policies to food service bullying across the board, educate parents. They do need that in the board minutes, school board minutes for that. And I did ask the question, did the state require us to do cyberbullying included that? Other states have. That is not in the legislation right now, but we already do that with our CO3 initiative. And as far as measurements, back to the state, that's not in that bill right now. They articulated to me that we don't know down the road what the measurements will be, but we do have strategic planning already in place with our CTC survey.
And we also have a committee that we have started, we're getting ready to start with representatives from the different levels of the schools, administration, parents, and probably some kids. So we think we're way ahead of this.
Kind of like the Olathe way, huh?
Yeah.
The Olathe way.
I had another question on policy CRB, the time and attendance, the new policy to address employees' use of time cards for Chronos systems. I assume that this has to do with the system that we have approved in regards to time cards and issues surrounding that. And so I thought I'd like to see the report on how our new system is performing based upon all of the difficulties that we had getting it in place.
And I think that's something we'll be bringing back to the board later this fall if we could. I didn't have time other than just to indicate that we've got to do an update for the board on this. We're still not implemented fully, but we've made a lot of progress of making sure that when we're ready to go that we're doing it right. So we'll come back with a report on that.
Okay, I'll wait, I'll have another question on it, but I'll just do that with you between now and October. Okay. Okay, Mr. Poland.
Yeah, Mr. Thomason, on the, what is it? Item 8.16, I believe, 143rd Street Benefit District. Just out of curiosity, it sounds like, you know, this is sort of an exception to anything that's been done in the past or anything like that. Why would we be expected to participate in this benefit district?
I'm sorry, what number was that?
It is not unusual in respect to the fact that we have participated in benefit districts to build arterial streets adjacent to our property in the past. Northwest High School we did, CBAC goes on and on. What was unusual in this benefit district when we first reviewed it, and to help, we've met twice with the city staff and the developer to try to understand both of these benefit districts. What was unusual is the way in which the assessment was being calculated. And what we've learned is that not everyone within that area is participating at this time because some of the property is still in the county. And the city, therefore, is participating for them in the benefit district. And that just wasn't clear to us at that time. As we have visited with them, they're going to provide some more supporting data to help us understand exactly how the assessment is being divided among the property owners. The fact that we're participating in a benefit district for a major arterial is fairly common. It's happened quite a bit in the past. We just had questions about how that assessment was being divided up among the property owners, and it appears the city's going to be able to provide us with data to answer our questions on that.
Thank you. I'm done.
Any other questions? I had another one on 8.04, which is...
Mr. Parker, excuse me for interrupting. I have one other question on that.
Okay, Mr. Churchman, I'm sorry.
I apologize. The initiator of that benefit district, is that the county or the city?
The initiator of that benefit district is the property owner of the 80 acres east of our high school site. And then the city, it is not the county, then the city has to accept petitions for benefit districts. That's who, once we all sign it, that's who it's submitted to and approved. Therefore, before you actually get to the signature stage, normally whoever initiates the benefit district has coordinated it with the city to make sure it will be acceptable. So it's really sort of the developer initiating it with the approval of the city.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that issue? 8.04, which is the memorandum of understanding with Southeast Kansas Service Center in regards to the Mill Creek Center programs. Is that going to be just a one-year memorandum?
Yes, that's our annual memorandum of understanding.
Thank you. And I had a question on 8.14, which is the physical education technology and instructional materials. Based upon all the conversations that we've had and the policy that the board policy we adopted in regards to health and nutrition, health and wellness and nutrition, how does this support that policy, and what are our expected outcomes with these materials, and are we doing enough?
First of all, I would say to you, you saw just a glimmer on the screen, though I didn't provide you a copy of the physical education strategic plan. And you saw in there that that aligned very nicely with the resources that we're requesting here. Mr. Bingesser could not be here this evening. He has an illness with his daughter who's in the hospital, so he couldn't be here this evening. But that does align directly with the curriculum that you approved. It aligns with the strategic directions in that area. One thing, of course, as we say, is it enough? It is probably extensive, and we're very excited about it. It's going to take some staff training in order to implement this appropriately. So we will probably be coming forth again in some capital outlay expenditure request for some additional materials, but we feel this is an excellent start to what we need to do for our students and for their physical wellness.
So what schools would these materials be in?
I don't have that direct information in front of me, but Ms. Hermick may have that. She's been working with Mr. Bengesser as well.
All secondary schools and a start with 8 elementaries who are going to start piloting and using some of the resources to learn about the implementation before we take it to all.
But the intent then is to take it to all of the schools, assuming that we have a successful
Yes, sir.
introduction.
Yes.
Well, as a representative of the Health and Nutrition and Wellness Council, I'm excited about that progress. Any other questions about the future action items? Then the next thing on the agenda this evening are information written reports, which the board receives for our general information. We have 9.01, which is facility usage report, showing the amount of hours that our district facilities are used by the community. And I understand, Dr. All, that 9.02, some questions from the board. You're going to pull that. That's the Delta contract option that's going to be pulled back for future study and answer questions.
Yes, we're going to bring that back, hopefully at the October meeting, or at least give you an update. It would not be our plan to implement any action on this, and I will bring it back to you as an action item after we address a couple of questions and get some additional information. So you'll see it come back as an action item, not as an information report.
Any questions from the board on that regard? 9.03 is access on campus programs and partnership, which we introduced this evening as part of our recognition, our partnership with Mid-American Nazarene University in regards to that program on campus. And then 9.04 board committee assignments.
Mr. Parker, I'd like to go back to 9.01. I did have a question, and staff provided information about the facility usage. My concern was not with facility usage by schools, but more by what I saw in a disparity by a high school and a middle school and the usage at those schools. I guess what I'm reflecting is that usage at those 2 locations quite different because of the facility, or is it because it's restrictive in the costs that our students may have to pay to have activities in that school at night? So a report was sent to me. I'd be glad to have it forwarded on to the rest of you if you'd like to see that. Again, I see it more as a city council issue in asking whether our schools and some of the programs that we're providing are important enough, or do we have those programs provided by the city, and are they accessible to all students? Is it a cost issue? Is it lack of interest? Is it a transportation issue? Because I do see 2 of the schools and the usage there quite different from the other schools.
I might respond on a couple points there. I think just in my brief review on that, in some cases the usage is really dictated by the facility based on which, for example, pool rentals, which pools are providing just over the times that they've been built are most desirable by the community. I think what Ms. Wilhelm's also interested in is that many community groups use our facilities, and those that are youth related through Parks and Rec and other entities is there a correlation between the use of schools in certain communities and the number of youth groups that are participating there. And I think facility rental is saying they didn't see a correlation, but one of the things we haven't done, and I know Mr. Aders left, is looking at team by team basis. And so we could probably gather a little more information on that. And Mr. Houghton's also looking like he could jump in on this too.
We did a complete analysis of what the city and the youth groups have requested the use of our facilities minus the pools. And we find that straight across on all of our junior highs, it's within several percentage points for that use. The way that the buildings are figured on facility usage includes everything. So when you take the heavy use of the churches in many of our facilities, the heavy uses of some of the pools, and especially some of the summer programs that are in those areas, that's where you see the particular spikes. The churches and the swimming pools that are used by outside groups every day and on the weekends is what spikes those. And if you look, those are the newer schools that have the newer pools that they're looking for. But when you get in, and our analysis today was what was loaded into the machines finally for all the city uses and all the city programs, they're extremely close throughout the entire district. The same thing with the pools, on the pool usage from the city on the request, open swims, things like this, all the pools are heavily utilized in the about the same amount percentage of request for them. So it does not appear there's a transportation problem. It does not appear, without knowing how many students the city uses in those programs, which we do not have. We just rent the pool and we rent the gym. But the amount of requests from the city per junior high is almost equal across all the junior highs.
So you don't believe, when we talk about connections in our neighborhood schools, you do not believe that there's the disparity in looking at the usage of those because of lack of ability to be a part of the cost of the program for our students citywide?
From the information that we have on renting those areas to the city and to the youth groups and to the Cub Scouts and to all those groups, no, I do not. That does not mean that one program in one junior high doesn't pull in several hundred, and the same program in another area pulls in 50. We do not have a count, and the city might have that, but we do not have a count. But the actual amount of hours that the city requests per junior high, we do have all of those counts. We do have by individual groups. We do have by parents wanting to rent the pool on a one-time basis, so forth, so on. And most of those across the junior highs are fairly equal.
Thank you.
So brings us to the end of our regular agenda this evening. I believe that we need to have an executive session, adjourned to executive session. Is that correct, Dr. All?
Yes, we need an executive
Okay.
session.
Approximately how long will we need?
I think 45 minutes.
Mr. Parker, I move that we recess to executive session to discuss personnel matters of non-elected personnel, to protect the privacy interests of the individuals to be discussed, and to consult with attorneys on matters deemed privileged in attorney-client relationship, to protect attorney-client privilege and the public interest, and for preliminary discussion relating to the acquisition of real property, to protect the public interest in obtaining the property, to return at regular session at 9:25 p.m.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Churchman, second by Mr. Poland to go into adjourn to executive session. Ms. Carpenter?
Mr. Churchman?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Mrs. Wilhelm?
Yes.